Hey guys, Budcat7 here. Okay, it is Thursday, July 8th, 2021, and I'd like to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. Alright, guys, well, in this video, I want to take a look at dolmen and the different types of dolmen that there are, because this is seldom mentioned by anybody who is showing just dolmen sites or discussing dolmen, when you can watch videos about it here on YouTube or read about it elsewhere. It's not really discussed in any, it just strictly focuses on the artifacts themselves. But it might be good to know, I would think, if you wanted to do an accurate analysis of what dolmen might be, and if you came across one, would you be able to identify one? But the reason why I'm interested so much in this is, if you know anything about it, and I've discussed it before on this channel here, as well as showing a number of different unusual dolmen sites, such as that in Korea, for example, where it just so happens that strange skeletal remains are found as well. But strictly speaking, on the dolmen, I mean, there's several different types, and I happen to personally believe that the ones to be found in North America are unique and really deserve their own classification as a different style type dolmen. So we know about them. We've seen them. Here's one, the most famous one of all here in North America because of its sheer size. This one in North Salem. And it's a 90-ton capstone, as they say it is a capstone, if that's what it really is. But, you know, it's compared to all the ones that you can find around the world, that's what they would call it. But it seems unusual that it's this big giant boulder and not some of these other types that we know of with sort of curiously rectangular and squared off type capstones that you can find elsewhere, which we're going to see in a moment. But I thought it'd be interesting to discuss the different types and perhaps even talk about the ones in North America as deserving their own, because they don't mention them in any of the sort of material that you might read on dolmen, such as in Wikipedia, baloney online encyclopedia. But we're going to read from those articles anyway, because, you know, they're good and short and just cover what we need to cover. But before that, I mean, if you didn't know, Jimmy and I, in our exploits in 2018, found this dolmen on top of Mount Ephraim here, which is this rather large flat stone. Here's Jimmy up by it, taking a look at it, and I'm down on the trail next to the stone wall. I just have these immense giant boulders in it, but it's this huge flat stone propped up on top of another stone. And, you know, this is a type of dolmen that's not really identified and discussed when, you know, looking into the official quote unquote explanation for the dolmen, and, you know, what are they too, you know. But we're going to get into that as well with the Wikipedia articles, because, you know, in the final analysis, they don't really know what they are and what the purposes were or anything. And what they ascribe to them is going to be based on their belief that there were no other humanoid type people in the past other than us. And everybody should have been our size, which is not even our size now, because we've grown so curiously some 10 centimeters since 1800, but we've stopped growing since then also, most curiously. So another topic for another time. Back to that again, because I have my own theory about why we've grown 10 centimeters and stopped. and a very interesting proposition I'm going to throw you that makes the most sense. But for a later discussion. So anyway, here's this dolmen Jimmy and I found on top of near the summit of Mount Ephraim there in Vermont. And Vermont says there are mysterious stone constructions up there, and that was one of them that we found there. But again, this unusual site, more like a propped up boulder or a propped up flat stone there that probably weighed a ton or so. And if you've been following along on my channel, you know what my theories are about some of what these dolmen really are, especially the ones in the Americas here, and maybe sort of hearken to a far older origination for the dolmen than any of the others to be found around the world. Again, I say that culture proliferated from the Americas, and people have their own theories. They say from wherever they are, whatever country you're at, or whatever they're saying that that's where it was. Although Dr. Robert Schoch says it's from Indonesia out, but I don't believe that. I believe it was the Americas, but and for good reasons. So, in any case, this is not the only place that I've seen one or something like it, but here's a highly unusual dolmen, what I'm calling a unique dolmen here that I found in the Green Mountains in rural upstate Connecticut in Sherman there off the Mallory site, which is my own sort of pet research site, if you didn't know. And here I am out in the field here showing this thing, which appears to be this large, giant flat slab stone on top of this boulder. And in the front of it are all these much smaller stones sort of stuffed into the mountain. I was calling it the clam rock for a while because, every time I passed it, it's not far from this area here, visiting here on a daily basis. So I pass by it almost on a daily basis. I was calling it the clam rock, but then Jimmy and I sort of thought more likely that it was this sort of maritime theme going on in Mallory with whales and serpents and other things. And it's just a strange thing I found there, and unusual sort of, is it effigy or a dolmen? It's maybe both. I don't know, but I'm saying it's like a whale's mouth with all the little fish in his mouth. And Jimmy suggested that it was Jimmy the Paleo Mountain Man suggested that it was just a ceremonial thing where all the people involved left a stone there in this like sacred stone place. These people obviously, you know, um, worship stone and all about stone. And what were the size of these people? And you know, just looking at these dolmen around North America is why we're going to discuss a little bit here. But other megalithic constructions here in Connecticut that I found, and this is in a playlist on my channel, guys. If you haven't visited it, you maybe should take a look at it because I have like 30 videos out. These just incredible stone constructions and stone walls in a sort of pristine part of Connecticut, preserved there probably for thousands of years. And just nothing's going to happen to this stuff here, folks, for thousands of years. Even this tree growing out of it here is not going to do much. It's going to die eventually. It's on top of the stone. It's not going to cover it, not like in jungles or whatever. Can't survive white oak or something like that. But what is this thing here that I found in New Milford here, and nearby my hotel? I wandered into the wilderness here and found this thing here, which is, what is this? Just a megalithic construction. What is it there? And it's just absolutely gigantic stones that seem to be cut, or at least stone found like this, flat like this, but almost like a polygonal construction. All they do is all this shimming in there to prop up the stone and make it more level. lower wall here. For what reason? Who knows? This was along a stream bed. It might have been more intense at one time, but what was being done with this thing, I have no idea. But you can see by my hand, it's a massive stones in there. Just what is it, and what's it doing in the middle of nowhere here? They're going to say it's an old mill, even though there's no record of any old mill being there. They just say it is. It doesn't matter. But, whatever it is can't be done by anything or anybody in the past. But, who's to say that? There's no record of it or anything. So, just something that you might want to watch. Your old friend Budcat doing some research out there in the field. So some very interesting things, man, just as much as this fellow here, Herb Eisengruber, who's an expat German living in Canada who did this research. And here's some dolmen he found in Nova Scotia. And he shows a number of these dolmen, which, again, it should really be categorized in a different category of dolmen that's not talked about, because these seem to be stone on stone. You have it's not placed like in the dirt, but placed on another stone and much smaller, not 90 tons like the other one we saw, but smaller, but in the middle of the wilderness there in Nova Scotia. You might be interested in his website here, paleoseti.com. He has some very interesting theories and talks about some other things. And, these are the kind of things that are in my bookmarks, guys, that I save for years and years, and eventually look at them. But if you didn't know, I mean, I'm sure you know about the megalithic walls found there on Easter Island and in New Zealand there. Here's a megalithic wall there. Well, how about one in Nova Scotia? How about this one right here? This sort of cyclopean megalithic wall. Here's the dolmen that are nearby. Might have some astronomical significance, Herb says. And here's the wall, which apparently extends for some distance. Giant, rivals anything might be found anywhere else. Here's Herb Eisengruber here, I guess, with this cyclopean stone wall, megalithic stone wall there in Nova Scotia. If you didn't know about it, it's absolutely fascinating. And who is putting this in? And so he's asking, huge boulders, is this the ultimate proof of a North American megalithic culture? Huge boulders were precisely cut and fit together in a huge wall. The stones remind me of some Inca walls I was able to study in Peru, South America. Those are serious ruins and compared to nothing the modern time settlers have built in North America. What surprises does this site still hold? And different views of the wall here in the middle of the wilderness there. Looks like a corner here with the roof hole in the ground. Does it go somewhere? Underground city. More close-ups of the wall. Corner here. So these are absolutely huge cyclopean blocks right there in Nova Scotia, just another place in the world where these megalithic stone construction and fitted stone, right? It says it runs a few hundred meters in every direction. and form roughly a square that encloses a big part of the hilltop. On some spots, the stones of the walls are gigantic. So, gigantic megalithic stonework there in Nova Scotia. There's some more stonework, some like a lip or a bevel of some sort in there, Andrew. Another one of these stone blocks. Okay, so it's all Herb Eisengruber's site here. You might be interested in taking a look at all the different things that Herb looks at. He's got his own theories, and he deserves all the credit. Again, another amateur who heard something about these things and went out there and located these things and collected the data there for us to look at these things and who are doing these things. And I've said repeatedly that some of these things, what we take as dolmen here with capstones, etc., are tests of strength from the large hominids. They're building these stone walls. Well, what are the dolmen for then? If you're building these stone walls with precisely cut stone, well, we're talking about two different eras, or what the actual structure might have been. Is it complete? Is it damaged? Is it, need further analysis, says Herb here, if you read some of the stuff that he's written here on the site. Proposes that, of course, it needs to be further scrutinized in a scientific way. So, you might want to talk about these are the dolmens and megalithic walls of Big Hill there in Nova Scotia. And how Herb went out there to take a look at these things. But your old friend Budcat's doing a sort of similar thing for you here in Vermont and here in Connecticut with all these other weird things going on here. And there was many very strange things going on here in Mallory. Very interesting things, all sorts of things going on here. And if you didn't know, there's this cyclopean megalithic wall there in Nova Scotia, something to think about as well. Okay, so let's find out about dolmens and what they say about them and what they don't know about them, which is a lot. And what we have been typically led to believe here is that there's some sort of burial place, but even by their own estimate, that a lot of these burials are secondary. That's similar to the mounds as well. In the Americas and elsewhere in the world, they find these secondary, or they determine to be secondary burials. Maybe they were all secondary burials. They weren't meant as burial mounds at all, but it's hard to say when you have all these other secondary burials and whether they can be determined as such or not. It seems a matter of some discretion, but let's read about dolmen here and what they say about them. Of course, none of these articles will mention any sort of dolmen in the Americas, especially North America here, northeastern part of America in particular. But they can be found elsewhere in the Americas, out in Colorado, really just gigantic ones elsewhere, and other megalithic wall constructions, here and there in the Americas, but seem to be obliterated. And even mentioned in some of these articles as well about something going on there. And okay, so a dolmen is a type of single-chamber megalithic tomb, usually consisting of two or more vertical megaliths supporting a large, flat, horizontal capstone or table. Most date from the early Neolithic period, 4000 to 3000 BC, and were sometimes covered with earth or smaller stones to form a tumulus. Small pad stones may be wedged between the cap and supporting stones to achieve a level appearance. In many instances, the covering has weathered away, leaving only the stone, quote-unquote, skeleton of the mound intact. And they show a number of these here in Ireland here with this rather flat one and sort of, standing stones propping it up India here. Here's Southern Korea here. Okay. And again, this is my own proposition that they were tests of strength by these large hominids. And why would I say such a thing? Okay, so let's look at what they might accept more than anything before I start talking about Adina or anybody like that in the Americas. But when were the Bell Beaker people around here in Europe where a lot of these dolmens just happen to be found? Okay, so the Bell Beaker culture, arising from around 2800 BC, it lasted in Britain as late as 1800 BC. And what's up with these Beaker culture, the Bell Beaker culture people? What's up with them? What's going on with them? That's so unusual, or anything we might have to know about. But physical anthropology might answer some of those questions. Historical craniometric studies found that the Beaker people appeared to be of a different physical type than those earlier populations in the same geographic areas. They were described as tall, heavy boned, and brachycephalic. Hmm, that's the vaulted craniums like the Adena, these awfully large skeletons found out in the Ohio Valley areas, but were responsible for mound building as far east as in Pennsylvania. So they existed somewhere around the time period that they may be referring to, or just after it, but how could they possibly know that for certain? It's all done on radiocarbon evidence and dating evidence and whatnot, which, if you ask Cornell University, they'd say, well, check it twice because it may not be correct. But and the whole thing about these, Bell Beaker people is why they were like this is unexplainable. Why they had these, physical anatomy as such. Okay, so they're much larger people. Okay, living at the time that they say that many of these dolmen were maybe constructed. All right. So keep that in mind about just who was around in these areas. Well, if the Bell Beaker people could be here, these rather large people with vaulted skull types there, okay, so who was there before them? Even bigger folk, maybe. All right, but they're not prepared to admit that. It's just to come out of nowhere. There's no explanation for it. There's no explanation for anything. Yet they're gonna have you believe this phony baloney, fantasy history that they're gonna make up for you about the dolmen because they don't know what else to say. But let's keep reading about the dolmen and get it out of the way so you know that there's all these different types of dolmen. And, the ones in North America should certainly deserve their own category and should be mentioned here, but they're not. It remains unclear when, why, and by whom the earliest dolmens were made, so it's unclear. The oldest known are found in Western Europe, dating from 7,000 years ago. Archaeologists still do not know who erected these dolmens, which makes it difficult to know why they did it. Aha! They are generally all regarded as tombs or burial chambers, despite the absence of clear evidence for this. Okay. Human remains, sometimes accompanied by artifacts, have been found in or close to the dolmens, which could be scientifically dated using radiocarbon dating. However, it has been impossible to prove that these remains date from the time when the stones were originally set in place. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you're thinking about dolmen. They don't have a clue. But as I said, it's more important for you and I to know that there are these different types. and what they actually could be, right? And I'm not the only person. I mean, in the folklore in the British Isles there, they talk about these dolmen being as tests of strength. And that's what I say they are, simply as tests of strength. When you see a 90-ton one there, may not be a single individual who did that, but maybe several individuals did that, but no more than that. Not a whole, because it would take the whole entire population to move a 90-ton boulder, pick it up off the ground, and put it on these pointy stones. You know, just don't make a lot of sense, but I guess if you're like these Bell Beagle people, especially here in North America here, where we got their cousins, the Adena, who seem to be constructed the same way, only bigger. All right, so who's building these megalithic walls and doing these other things and building giant earthworks and everything else that seem to be, larger than the pyramids in Egypt and all this kind of stuff. That ain't no easy task in itself. There's always people of average height, which in those days would have been much shorter and smaller than us. And if we're not Neanderthals, then they were certainly smaller than Neanderthals, but just average sized people just like us, building these things and having to make all kinds of contraptions and thingies and all going. We didn't do any of it, but people of larger stature did, and that's what's missing from all this discussion. The word dolmen entered archaeology when Théophile Caret de la Tour d'Auvergne used it to describe megalithic tombs in his Origines Gauloises, using the spelling dolmen. So I'm not going to read the rest here because it's pointless. The whole article here is about where the word dolmen came from. That's what it's about. It's not about the dolmen, because I just read to you. They know nothing. They don't know nothing. You see? Nothing. It's anybody's guess. Okay, so I'm guessing that some rather large people were throwing these things around and not average sized people in the past. Okay, at some epic of the giants of the past. Okay, who else would be moving around these stones? We already found out about them, where rock cut tombs that they were buried in, and all these other stone constructions associated with the giants, and often caves and caverns and mediums such as gravel and sand and other building materials that they were buried in, right? Okay, so what's the first type of dolmen, if you didn't know, and what they consider to be a type of dolmen is this Inukshuk. Okay, so Inukshuk or Inukshuk from the Inuit language is a man-made stone landmark or cairn built for use by the Inuit or these other peoples of the North, the other peoples of the Arctic region of North America. These structures are found in northern Canada, Greenland, and Alaska. This combined region above the Arctic Circle is dominated by the tundra biome and has areas with few natural landmarks. The Nukshuk may historically have been used for navigation as a point of reference, a marker for travel routes, fishing places, camps, hunting grounds, places of veneration, drift fences used in hunting, or to mark a food cache. So it could be anything. The Inupiat in northern Alaska use Inuksut to assist in the herding of caribou into contained areas for slaughter. Varying in shape and size, the Inuksuk have ancient roots in Inuit culture. Historically, the most common types of Inukshuk are built with stone placed upon stone. The simplest type is a single stone positioned in an upright manner. There is some debate as to whether the appearance of human or cross shaped cairns developed in the Inuit culture before the arrival of European missionaries and explorers. So, another one of these contentious things of cross like designs, whether they be, petroglyphs or in stone like this or whatever medium it is, and crosses like this. And they're always wondering if it's, because of European contact, or was it before that? Because that's an interesting question to know about. So, they don't know. But it'd be interesting to postulate that it goes further back than that. And we have no idea what the real past is, so it's quite possible. Okay, historically, most common types of Inukshuk are built with stone placed on stone. A simple type is a single stone positioned in an upright manner. Okay, so he said this. The size of some Inukshuk suggests that the construction was often a communal effort. Okay, so maybe, I guess, and if it was it ceremonial, etc.? But these don't really seem to be the same type of dolmen that we're, you know, used to knowing about, but they're calling them that. And then on top of it, okay, they don't say much more about them, but here are some of them right here. They certainly are interesting, and if they're old, caves contain some rather large stones piled up there, and they're saying it's communal effort because of the size of the stones. Look at some of these things. So that's what they are, and certainly could have been built by people of much larger stature at some ancient time. But what they're saying about the modern uses of, you have these people out there building all these things, and here's where they're going to screw up the past by building all these things in modern times. If anything ever happens, whatever, nobody in the future will ever be able to discern which ones are older, which ones are newer, why this and that. It's just people screwing up history by recreating these things in the wilderness. I've heard of it before. I've heard of people doing these things out in the wilderness, and they shouldn't be doing it. We don't even know about the past. We haven't examined all these things thoroughly enough right now, and now we're going to botch it all up by creating all these things, and nobody's going to know where it came from, when it came from, all this kind of stuff. So this is what they're saying about these modern stuff. Look, they're building them here. Look at this. No, don't do that. It's like replica antiques or something like that. You don't really want that. Okay. Okay, so we have that kind of dolmen, and this is a polygonal dolmen. And all these stuff is taken from, except that one with the Inuit peoples, which could quite possibly be Alaska, I guess. And they said it's North America, so it must be, or Canada or whatever. So the rest of them are from elsewhere around the world, and especially not in the northeastern part of North America, like this one in North Salem. This one in Oregon there. Okay, looking more like the Korean ones, right? Polygonal dolmen is a visually very attractive megalithic architectural structure, and is therefore often depicted as the archetypical dolmen. It is encountered especially frequently in the north of the Danish island of Zealand, in the Swedish province of Bohuslän, and on the Cimbrian Peninsula, for example, at Trollkirken in Jutland. In Schleswig-Holstein, there are 11 examples. In Lower Saxony, Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, and Saxony-Anhalt, Ludolfsland, they appear are only occasionally. Neolithic monuments are expressions of the culture and ideology of Neolithic communities. Their emergence and function are indicators of social development. I guess, yeah. But, again, you have to understand that these people are looking at these things from the position that only people like us, Homo sapien type average people, could have built these things in the past, always with that in mind. 5 to 9 supporting stones, or orthostats, shape the ground plan of the polygonal chamber. A single, sometimes especially large capstone covers them. An externally built entrance passage, whilst obligatory, has often not survived. In Dithmarschen, the rectangular and polygonal dolmens of Albersdorf are particularly important. The Brunt camp is one of the most impressive examples of this type. Typologically viewed, the chamber of Hemmelmark, Rendsburg, Eckford stands out, which, with its unusual dimensions of 2.8 to 2.25 meters and a division of subchambers by vertical slabs. Polygonal dolmen occur more rarely within stone enclosures and more frequently in round barrows. So, barrows are mounds. Originally, it was thought that this type of dolmen originated in the West due to its approximately circular construction. These views were refuted by comprehensive research by Ewald Schultz in Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, which emphasized the auxthonous origin of different types. So I think a lot of gibberish about the fact that they can't. There's no consensus on this at all, and it's one of the problems in figuring these things out for them, right? Because the past sort of stops for them somewhere back then in all these places, and they don't know what to make of any of these things and what they could possibly be. Now, these things certainly don't sound like these dolmen, which are tests of strength, other than that these huge stones are put in place and they seem rather rectangular in many instances, such as cut stone, right? So, you have to consider this. Different types of dolmen indicate different things. Purposes, if any, is it a purpose? Or is it a message or a sign? Or, as I say, just simply a test of strength? And, there may have been some rivalry among relative clans of these giant humanoids or whatever, and this is a symbol of the strength of their clan. But it didn't require the whole community to get involved, just the strongest members. You see what I'm saying? And this tradition carried on even into much later times where you're going to find these other sorts of dolmen which seem, much smaller versions of that giant one, which may show different time periods. Rectangular dolmen. A rectangular dolmen, extended dolmen, or enlarged dolmen is a specific type of megalith, rectangular in shape, with upright side stones and usually two capstones. The term rectangular dolmen was coined by Eckhard Ahner and is used especially in the German state of Schleswig-Holstein, where dolmens of this type of ground plan primarily occur. A more precise term, however, is extended dolmen, used by Ewald Schultz and Ernst Sprachhoff, because these types of dolmen also occur with trapezoidal ground plans. Neolithic monuments are expressions of the culture and ideological of Neolithic communities. Their emergence and function are a hallmark of social development. It's like parroting the same thing over and over again here. And yes, but what culture are we talking about? They don't know. And let's say they were, it seems to me that many of these cultures, even though they show these primitive sort of constructions, were more advanced in knowledge than we think. But let's say they were survivors of some catastrophic event that happened and they were living in more advanced societies with technological capabilities that we don't understand quite exactly, but and then they survive some catastrophe. Now they have advanced knowledge of a lot of different things, but do they have the ability to implement it? Is all the technology still with them? Are they just simple people and not, the engineers? Maybe they're all dead, so you got to think about these things and, where people, they talk about developing, well, where'd they come from? They show migration in from somewhere. It's nebulous. It just that's how these things go, and they seem to be around. These rather large people seem to be around at the time that these things were constructed, by their estimate. If you want to go strictly by the Bell Beaker culture as being an example, and where they were exactly all over the place, where it just so happens to be all these dolmen. So whilst the simple dolmen, as a rule, only had one capstone but could have two, the rectangular dolmen, which differs primarily in the orientation of its support stones, standing from the simple dolmen lying, usually had two capstones, but also can have just one. Once a third capstone is added, it is called a great dolmen in Germany. A subgrouping of this type of dolmen is based on the ever present entranceway, which, for example, could be designed with a roof height, half stone, or single angle support stones. Mounds. Within long mounds, rectangular dolmens are usually oriented at right angles to the axis of the enclosure. The proportion of rectangular dolmens in round, including oval mounds, compared with simple dolmens, increases in Schleswig-Holstein from 20% to at least 27%. The proportion of mounds is probably higher because experience has shown that circular mounds leave fewer traces than stone enclosures. In Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, however, only two of the 20 extended dolmens surveyed by E. Schultz were covered by round mounds. So, who else are constructing mounds during this time period or close to this time period? Well, the Bell Beaker people constructing barrows, bowl barrows, and bell barrows. Okay, again, bell barrow, bowl barrow, barrow mounds. Okay, who's around? Okay, so guess who's around? Large humanoids. Simple dolmen. Okay, so a simple dolmen, what's a simple dolmen? You would think it'd be a dolmen like, we just more or less saw there in Nova Scotia, the one I showed up on Mount Ephraim there, but no mention of any of those things. The simple dolmen or primeval dolmen is an early form of dolmen or megalithic tomb, which none of them are tombs, so why bother mentioning it? That occurs especially in Northern Europe. The term was defined by archaeologist Ernst Sprackhoff and utilized by Ewald Schultz in publicizing his excavation of 100 megalithic sites in the North German state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. The civil dolmen emerged in the early days of the development of megalithic monuments of the funnel beaker culture and around 3500 BC. So, funnel beaker culture. Beaker culture. I just mentioned them. Large humanoids of much larger stature than anybody of average height of the Homo sapiens species back then, which could be up to 5'6", where these humanoid creatures were like 7 foot tall and better, with vaulted, weird craniums. Right? Who's building these things? Well, if they're building them there, guess where else they're building them? Except that this is just immense, and their capstone is a giant boulder and not this flat rock. So, is this an earlier example with much bigger humanoids doing the process of making these things as tests of strength? Because I know if you're a rational thinking person, you at those times and you're walking through the woods and you saw something like that, you'd be like, who in the world did that? And whoever did that, I'm going in the opposite direction. So, simple Dolmen. Okay, they appear across the almost for 3500 BC. They appeared across almost the entire region covered by the stone cult structures of Nordic megalith architecture, but not in the Netherlands. In Lower Saxony, west of the River Weser, nor east of the River Oder, and only once in Sweden. Neolithic monuments are an expression. Okay, you're gonna talk about it again like some weird parrot. Distinction between simple dolmens and stone cysts. In many cases, there is no clear distinction between simple dolmens and stone cysts. In the necropolis of Brussels-Warschau in the Uckermark region, simple dolmens and stone cysts occur together. The differences consist in the degree to which they are embedded and the material used for the side stones, orthostats. In simple dolmens, the side stones consist of rubble, in stone cysts of slabs. Whether this was of relevance for Neolithic people remains questionable because there are also combinations of both materials. Evolution. The smallest simple dolmens occur on the Danish island of Zealand, where the ratio of length to breadth of the southern half of the island is even less in the north. This small size led researchers such as Hans Jürgen Bayer to refuse to give simple dolmens the status of a megalithic site. Whether, however, the equally very small megalithic tombs fulfill his conditions is still open to question. Also, in Sicily in recent years are being found small dolmen monuments because around the end of the third millennium BC, the west coast of the Mediterranean island was caught up in a cultural wave, bringing the bell-shaped goblet, the bell beaker people. They're not coming right out and saying it. They're just not. I don't know what the problem is. And so far in these articles, they're just mentioning the Beaker people in a sort of backhanded way. You know, why? Why? What did you go? We're going to get the wrong idea, maybe, of giant humanoid people living in the past, moving around these stones, and that's all it required. It didn't require all these whole entire society and contraptions and gadgets and gizmos and all this kind of stuff. Just a bunch of guys got together, picked these things up, and brought them where they had to go because they were huge and strong as elephants, or maybe stronger. You can follow the evolution of simple dolmens, which for the early builders was a learning process, and how step by step they met the demands placed on them at the time by producing ever more mature and larger solutions. This also applies to development of simple dolmens into extended dolmens, also called rectangular dolmens, to its round variant, to polygonal dolmen, and to the great dolmen. So for them, this whole thing follows a process, and these dolmens are more sophisticated in a lot more ways than these simple ones that they want to say here are categorized as dolmen in North America here, such as this one in North Salem, right? But what are they really? A different kind of dolmen that they don't want to classify and they don't want to talk about, especially from here in the Americas. And you can guess why, folks. This whole proposition why I say everything emulates from the Americas, and it's not the new world, it's the old world, and the old world is the new world. And I know everybody gets confused with that thing. It goes over their head. A lot of things on his channel, I think, go over a lot of people's heads, and what they're used to, whatever propaganda is put out by the controlled opposition as well, with all their crazy stories all made up. But it seems to me that these are tests of strength. And then, as these people devolved over the millennia, they carried traditions on, but the size of the boulders got less and less. And what they were able to actually do, and maybe a single individual or a couple individuals out of the tribe could do. Okay, you can only get so many people around a boulder. Any other ways could you require a crane? No other way you're going to lift a 90-ton boulder, right? But if you would rather huge humanoid creatures with the strength of multiple elephants, you could with a bunch of your buddies. And these block cysts. The prototype of the simple dolmen is the so-called block cyst, enclosed on all sides and dug into the ground. It has no entrance and is, once closed, difficult. So listen to this part of it, okay? So here's their explanation. Very good, because people of our size are doing this thing, and why should we do such a thing, okay? But of course, if they were larger type humanoid creatures, then it doesn't present any sort of issue. The prototype of the single dome is called the box. It's enclosed on all sides and dug into the ground. It has no entrance and is, once closed, difficult for the technically less skilled user to open and reutilize. You get it? It was therefore only intended for a one-time use. Yeah, sure it was. You're going to go through all that effort for a one-time use? I don't think so. All right. And because it couldn't be easily opened or put back together by people of our stature, well, it wasn't made by people of our stature. So that there's no concern whatsoever. See? We have to consider it that way because we are the center of the universe when it comes to the past, because no other humanoids existed in the past. Just as simple as that. Even though we know better, and all the accounts over and over and over and over, including this mainstream research on the Bell Beaker people, but somehow they can't make that connection. Why? There's no connection there, huh? These people occupy these areas and just so happen to be huge and, capable, certainly strength wise alone, to be handling things, and had a far different perception than we could possibly ever have because we're not ever going to be that big. We can only imagine. It's like we could imagine what it is to be an elephant or a whale or something like that. I have no concept of what that is ever. Okay? Sorry, you're not going to know about somebody who's 16 feet tall, what their perception of the world is, how they feel about it, and how they think about things and do things. They can do far different things and think about things in far different ways than you and I, because we don't have the same perception. Get it? So, we can only speculate on these things, but it seems like a practical speculation to assume that much larger humanoid type creatures would be more capable of moving large stone around than smaller ones. Does that make just simple sense to anybody? Okay? And the fact that these Bell Beaker that they're prepared to admit to, although there were millennia of the giants and epics upon epics upon epics of the giants going on, and not so easy to discern, and radiocarbon dating is not perfect and has these, sort of, you know, plus or minus. So, simple Dolmen. On the Isle of Silt in the Schleswig-Holstein, two simple dolmens were found in a common enclosure, but there is usually only one simple dolmen within an enclosure, lying parallel to the longitudinal axis, the so-called parallel type. The so-called parallel type. In Ulstrup near Gundersholm, two of the three simple dolmens form a pair next to one another in the enclosure. The block system in the Teichskov of Varnish near Abanara and the one in the Norskov on Alsen lie diagonally within the enclosure. North of the river Eider, about 20% of the simple dolmens are covered by a circular mound. So half a dozen, six of one, and a half dozen of the other. You call it what you will. Is all these different ones and types and everything. It's just making it more difficult to discern from anything, and probably bears more scrutiny. It's just they can't figure it out. And here's two pictures. My channel really isn't about pictures. I very seldom show pictures or anything. It's more about the discussion on my channel. I know the channels that show a lot of pictures get a lot more views and a lot more subscribers, but I don't show a lot of pictures. There are some involved sometimes, but it's all about the analysis. It's all about the discussion. That's the most important part of it. Just showing you what it is and come to your own conclusion without discussion is kind of sucks. It's kind of boring. Don't you think? Or trying to just hear other voices that want to talk about these things. But access, initial progress in terms of multiple use was achieved by the creation of an entrance. And examples that were still dug in the ground by the entrance was in Denmark, Mecklenburg, Western Pomerania, initially made through the roof, as for example at Bark Bjørn. So through the roof, like the the types of buildings there that they build in Russia, which are really they have entrances and roof entrances. Okay, and the people at Galena Canyon also had roof entrances, probably for security purposes there. But you have these types of structures in Russia that have the opening at the top, which is very interesting. By dividing the ceiling into a large stone and a stone that could be lifted by hand, access from above was enabled. This variant, however, is not very widespread. Sounds very interesting, technical variant there, and really makes me think about the Galena people there in Galena Canyon in their Torreons with their highly designed structures there that they had there, with advanced design structures, and types of ergonomic furniture and all this kind of other stuff. This development path was abandoned in favor of of options using other axes of entry. The simple dolmen was now buried less deeply, and the upper half of one of the ends was used as access. This form can be found in the stone enclosures of Grundoldendorf. The weight of the single stone was still divided among three orthostats, the upright rectangular stones. This process shows the discovery of the stability of the three-point support system. So the three-point support system, for some reason. The always parallel-sided open simple dolmens are 2.2 to 2.6 meters long and 1 to 1.8 meters wide and slightly larger than the closed examples. For Schleswig-Holstein, a small chamber at Doelsdorf, Pond County, only 1.8 meters long and zero point 0.5 meters wide, is, in this respect, an exception. Of the 20 simple dolmens of Schleswig-Holstein, 12 are sealed on all sides. 5 are classified as open at the end, and the the design of 3 destroyed simple dolmens cannot be determined. Of about 88 simple dolmens once found in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, there are still 51 survivors, so quite a few left there. But what are they? It just seem to be all different kinds of things going on there, and it makes me think of Mallory a little bit about what I found along the brook there, and these weird constructions built, and these not even so much niches, but these like boxes and other weird shelf-like things built into the sides of the hills with a lot of sort of even sized stone around, like a gravel type stone around all the things. Just very strange, and other sort of niches and cutouts along the brook area there in Mallory. It was very interesting. And what the heck were they doing with any of that stuff? I have no idea. Subsequently, the first rectangular dolmens, Gramdorf in the municipality of Wangels, and passageways were built, still sunk in pits. In the next step, the Neolithic builders understood how to lay the foundation of the 3 or more supporting stones, which in simple dolmens were always placed on their longest sides, in such a way that their base of the structure could be closer to the surface of the ground. This higher positioning allowed a passage to be added that led into the chamber at ground level. Now, however, a threshold stone was required that separated the chamber and the profane or secular passage symbolically from one another. The effort was made to reduce the size of the slab covering the other. So here, listen to this rationale here, because well, you could think of it in some different terms, but again, it's, they have to think of it with people of our height in mind. In my mind, I'm thinking it of larger people. Okay, so maybe the larger people devolved slightly, and they needed to reduce the size of the stone. But this effort to, again, it's explained in these terms, and it's probably wrong. You see, because they associated with us, average people, which were like pee-wee size back then. Effort was made to reduce the size of the slab covering the opening of the reusable simple dolmen to one that could be manhandled. Their words there, manhandled, which shows the difficulty in it by the settlement community. So, I'm laughing at that. I'm sorry, guys, but that strikes me as it's very funny of what they're supposing gets them. Okay, it's just ridiculous, I think. So much so that I gotta laugh. The simple dolmen with the passage evolved into the extended dolmens, which are generally longer, usually have more than one capstone, and apart from the transitional types at New Gars, Bad Doberan County, have orthostats that stand on one of their 2 smallest faces, thus allowing the roof of the chamber to be higher. Simple dolmens once lay within stone enclosures or under circular mounds, but many of these have been removed. The simple dolmen at Linskov of Finland lies within a 168-meter long enclosure, the second longest in Denmark. By comparison, the longest German enclosure measures 160 meters. In Poland, the length of one chamberless enclosure is 130 meters. In the Netherlands, researchers have only come across one site with an enclosure. So these things are traditionally buried in mounds. And what are they? Okay. I don't know, but it'd be interesting to find out why they buried these things. It's interesting that in research by Harold S. Gladwin there in Arizona with the Snaketown people, they found this huge mound, and when they dug down way deep in it, they found a block of stone with a metal rod through it, and then they associated with the Land Survey Department of the U.S. Department of Agriculture or something like that, and like, why would they do such a thing and then bury a mound on top of the thing? For why? What would be the purpose of that? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so, what are these ones like found in Nova Scotia? What are these dolmen here? I think totally different classification of dolmen. Okay, again, in my estimate, tests of strength to indicate test of strength of these communities. Okay, not done by the whole community, but by the strongest individuals of what there were many who were probably willing to show their strength, and that's what they were interested in doing. And huge stone walls. Where else could there be such sort of things? Okay, so here's the megalithic ruins in Connecticut there with huge stone and this clam rock here. But here at the end of my video series, I show this area here with these huge, absolutely huge stones, gigantic cyclopean sized stone piled on top of one another here as I walk around and show it in this area here in Mallory, and these earthen covered stone walls on either side here. I just left an area of earthworks, and right ahead of this is a stone turtle, a megalithic stone sea turtle effigy, which, these burials were found with these artifacts that included harpoons. Okay, so this is a whole Mallory site. But here is these earthen covered stone walls with just immense, giant stones in them. And in the background are just truck sized boulders stacked on top of each other in this area of Mallory here. It's just amazing. And so many other areas of Mallory where megalithic sized stonework was done. Okay, so you can see it in these videos here. Here's going megalithic here with these immense stones with this very strange construction. It's really beautiful there too. And some of my videos is filmed with the uh, nice camera, so they really came out nice in like 1080p and whatnot. And here's just strange stuff going on here, and megalithic size stones, construction in the brook here. That's a snake's head. Very odd. And huge stone there. Just right in the corner of this brook. It's amazing stuff there, guys. Stone walls there in rural Connecticut there. You can see right in a playlist. And I show you some incredible things in these videos here. I don't get a lot of views, but anybody else was showing just pictures of stuff and whatnot, they get like thousands of views. But here you can see it on film, on really good film with GoPro 1080p stuff. But in HD. So in any case, guy, what are these dolmen? And megalithic walls that are here in North America. Who were they built by? Well, I highly suggest that they were built by people of larger stature, and that these dolmen were tests of strength of these large humanoid people. That's what they were into, displaying their strength. And again, if you were to come upon this, you would know that some pretty strong guys were living in these areas here, and that you should stay away if you know it's good for you. So, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed that little thing. I didn't know if you knew there were different types of dolmen, but that certainly should be discussed before you do some sort of analysis of these things, so we know what we're talking about. So it seems like they're all over the map and they don't know what they really are in any of the instances of dolmen. Some of these things can appear to be like, buildings or structures or whatever they are. Certainly not like these here. Excuse me. In the three's the charm, I guess. But there's a lot of very odd stone constructions here in North America, and no less here's a place where there's like a pyramid style stone construction here. I'm showing the size of some of these giant boulders that are used in the construction of these walled areas. Just immense stuff. Built by giants, folks. The walls of North America, northeastern North America, built by giants, and all these dolmen built by giants, guys. Nobody else, not us. We didn't do any of it. We want to take credit for it, but we didn't do it. Some other humanoid species did that we either killed off or killed them down to a point where they integrated with friendly peoples or whatever, and all the way up to our current times, and all the supposed growth that we've done from the 1800s was just a final part of whatever giant hominids and humanoid species were absorbed into our population because we were compatible. And that these things do from time to time express themselves. And there are people living in the world today where they have more of their alleles and dominant alleles expressing themselves as a more pure DNA with giant DNA in them. And that's who built all these things, folks. And these dolmen, these type of dolmen, and probably several different types of dolmen from around the world, are simply tests of strength, whereas the other ones appear to be of some use or ceremonial nature, strictly. Okay, these large ones, this tiny ton one, and other ones, even these smaller ones, from perhaps a much later period, are also tests of strength. They can't figure them out. That's what I say they are, by these giant humanoid type people who lived during those times. It wasn't us, folks. We may have been living among them, like Devaka said when he came and got shipwrecked here and saw a little tiny, caveman type people and giant, you know, people with 6 foot spears and, 3 and 4 foot arrows. So think about it, folks. I'm just asking you to think about who is doing these things, and just happen to be among the stone walls here and in Ireland too. similar things going on there. Who were these people? And at a time where the sea levels were lower, possibly. Okay, there's still lots of things to be found underwater, including the stone walls go through bodies of water that exist now and seem to have been there for a very long time. Okay, when were these stone walls built? Well, thousands and thousands of years ago by large humanoid type people. Okay, guys, well, I thought you might enjoy seeing some of these things and hearing about the different dolmen that there are before you have so you have a complete understanding of what they are and the different classifications and where mainstream is at on them. They still don't know and can't figure out what they are and who did them and who made them. All right, guys. Anyway, if you like the video, please do hit the like button. And if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe because we discuss very different ideas on this channel than you can hear anywhere else. You might want to pay attention. All right, guys. Anyway, Bloodcat7 signing off. Peace.